It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland Retrospective here on the SPDM Crew Podcasting Network. And this is my show where my guests and I each pick a related film and discuss, and hopefully by the end of this episode, you'll have a couple of films to add to your watch list. And this episode is going to be taking us to some really classic Japanese cinema from director Akira Kurosawa, adaptations of Shakespearean plays. We have Throne of Blood, which is a Macbeth adaptation, and Ron, which is a King Lear adaptation. Joining me is my buddy Luke. Luke, thank you so much for coming on.
Always a pleasure, Shane.
Absolutely. And let's dive on in to Throne of Blood.
Hmm.
And I've actually discussed this on a show before, as this was one of the films that I did probably a year and a half now at this point on my movie club with my friends. So it was a
Nice.
little bit since I rewatched it and was excited to check it out. But Luke, what are your general thoughts on Throne of Blood?
So my general thoughts are I really, really, really like this movie. I thought it's a great like Macbeth adaptation. I don't have so for both this one and for Iran, I don't have the most experience with Shakespeare because like where I come from, it's not like we know of William Shakespeare, but we're not like unless you're studying like actual like literature or something like that. It's not like we read his plays or like deconstruct his plays. So I'm familiar enough, so obviously you're familiar enough with Macbeth and the story, and I really appreciate the spin how I think this is one of the few movies Kurosawa takes on like supernatural, and I really like that. Like I
Mhm.
really like those scenes with they call it evil spirit. I didn't know
Yep.
if it was necessarily evil. It definitely was a spirit, but like I was like, why is that old lady that kind of sounds like a dude? Why is it evil? Like just because they don't understand it. Okay, cool. But I really like that, and then it got me thinking, is there a movie by Kurosawa that we like that's almost straight on horror movie? Because if so, I would love to watch it. Because like that
I
vibe of this movie is so cool.
I don't know. There's other Japanese like old school Japanese horror
Oh yeah.
is so cool.
Hmm.
And this is definitely the closest I feel like Kurosawa probably gets to that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And he has a vibe because just that whole entire sequence where uh Washizu, who is our Macbeth, which is
Hmm.
very interesting, Luke, you live in the land of Macbeth, the Scottish
Correct.
play.
Okay.
So there you go. But I've seen a lot of adaptations
Hmm.
or read a
Hmm.
lot of adaptations of Macbeth. You know, you have the Roman Polanski, Hugh Hefner produced
Hmm.
version that I watched in school that was like from Playboy Productions. I'm like, what? And you have this obviously, and this film really takes a interesting approach to it because it's very Japanese. And
Yes.
I think that's the coolest thing because like Macbeth is very Scottish. And
Hmm.
this completely changes the culture, which changes the supernatural elements
Yeah.
because it isn't like double double toil and trouble,
Uh-huh.
a bunch of witches. It's this spirit and that whole construction out in the middle of the woods,
Yeah.
the like the weaving and stuff like that. It's so eerie and creepy. The fog
When she
and
disappears after, like, ooh, I was like, oh,
yeah,
nice.
and just the cinematography, the crisp black and white
Hmm. Hmm.
shot film, and just the shot of Mifune, who Ishiro Mifune is like the greatest actor in the history of Japan.
Hmm.
And him like coming up to the camera looking completely insane,
Yes.
yelling at the spirit is a vibe. And
Hmm.
it's an incredible vibe. There's just iconic shots of this maddening,
Hmm.
just screaming and vitriol of like how much he's upset at this spirit that like spirit gave you everything,
Yep. Yep.
but it'll also take it all away from you.
Well, it
If
did
you,
it though, because you can argue both of these movies, you know, is there some sort of message that don't listen to your woman? Because both of these movies, surprisingly, they have like
well,
the
this
woman
is a
because he's
self-fulfilling
yeah, yes,
prophecy
exactly, yes.
for sure.
Yeah.
And this is the greatest, like Macbeth is the greatest cautionary tale of
Hmm.
don't try so hard to make something not happen because you're 100% going to make something happen.
Because yeah, like the movie presents it in a way where he's happy, like he's like, oh yeah, I've promised, or the spirit told us his son's gonna, be heir of this fortress or the
Mhm.
whatever they call it. So I'm happy. And then, his wife was like, well, but what if it doesn't happen? And I'm like, ooh. And I watched the round before this, where obviously there's, the woman in there has a different reason for doing what she's doing. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting that, like he was like, fine with his destiny. He was like, yeah, okay, but I know it's supposed to happen. And then as a woman, but what if it doesn't? And or what if he's plotting against you and this and this and this? And I'm like, oh, okay, okay, okay.
Just churning up that drama.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then like the
Lady Macbeth.
scene. Yes, and then the scene when they like waiting for his arrival. Well, I cannot remember his name and his son's arrival, right? And he sees the spirit again, and he's just freaking out. I really liked Mifune's performance because as you said, yes, he goes from this like being like kind of content to like being
Mhm.
really mad at the spirit to like devolving into this insanity where he doesn't know what to trust, who to trust. And then when he sees the forest walking towards him and knows he lost, and his army is no longer behind him, and they actually execute him. That
There's
was like,
just so many great moments in this
yes,
film that you just hit on all in a row there. I love from the start the
mhm,
framing narrative
yeah,
of like this there's like this deep like resonant
yeah,
narration happening with the this towering phallic monument in the middle of the fog and everything. It just
hmm,
sets the mood. This movie has so much mood. And
correct,
even from the start, like there's such just a great shot of Mifune and his best friend like trudging up the front, like perfectly framed in the center with the porches and everything. I'm like, there's so much great imagery here.
hmm,
Uh Shizu Yamada, who is Lady Washizu,
hmm,
is it's that makeup. So creepy and
yes,
unnerving. The lack of eyebrows and like the
and the
little
extra
pattern makeup.
eyebrows,
Yep.
yeah,
And she is vicious. And that's the thing. That's Lady Macbeth. Frances
hmm,
McDormand did it great in Tragedy of Macbeth. It's just
hmm,
that prodding. Like
yep,
you're right. Would this really have happened if she did like stroke her husband's ego and ambitions?
hmm,
No, she was petting it real nice
hmm,
and stroking this. And you have the scene where he finally assassinates
hmm,
the Lord, and that's such a great scene. The one scene where you have Washizu leading this meeting in this big open room, and
yep,
the spirit keeps popping in. He goes nuts. He's like
hmm,
crab walking, crawling, like freaking the hell out in this scene. And it's so perfectly edited with like the
hmm,
spirit in and out of the scene. It's so well shot how the camera moves. But the climax of this movie is so damn good where you see that eerie shot
hmm,
of all the trees
and the
and you just like
mist, you know, yep,
and you're just sitting there like, oh, shit's gonna go down. And it went down fast. And this was such an interesting choice
hmm,
that like there's not a Macduff who killed Macbeth.
hmm,
His whole army just
yep.
starts shooting arrows at him and is one of the most terrifying action scenes I've ever seen in a movie because how do you fake that?
No, I was actually thinking about that, during the scene. I was like, those actually seem like real arrows hitting those
I
them
wouldn't
woods.
be shocked if
They
they
were.
were.
They
It's
were
just
like, if you read on IMDb's trivia page, there's a section about how there were real arrows, but they were kind of on a wire, so they would hit, they would not hit the actor. And if you slow it down, you can tell that's why he's like breaking down. You can see like tiny wires coming out of some of them. Obviously, the ones that hit him, they are like fake bamboo ones, so
yeah,
they are not that method, okay,
but
but
like Mifune in that scene is
yeah,
completely unhinged, and
yes,
the
yeah,
fear was in me because I'm like, this
mm,
looks way too real, and he got brutalized. I'm just like, this is the most brutal death they came
hmm,
up with for Macbeth in any of these adaptations.
yes,
Like, holy crap, just getting pelted with
hmm,
arrows from his own men, and like that whole structure, the wall that he's like trying to run around, and he's like,
hmm,
it's like, and just like arrows coming in. That seems so well structured and so unnerving to watch. It's just, this movie has so many incredible moments, incredible visuals. It
hmm,
doesn't do anything, I don't think, particularly new or unique with the story of Macbeth. It's a
agree.
relatively straightforward adaptation,
Hmm.
but oh, it delivers in so many different ways.
I think setting it up in a feudal Japan, it really helps the story, and that's why I would say this is the cultural appropriation I like.
Yeah.
To make a joke, obviously. No, but like to a point. That's why I like when stories are adapted by different groups that
Mhm.
don't necessarily the story belongs to, because you can have your own spin on it. Like, who would have thought Macbeth in a feudal Japan, right? But obviously, like if you give it to somebody like Kurosawa who has a unique vision and reworks the story just a tiny bit, then you see it's not even about, well, I don't know what Macbeth, again, I never properly analyzed it, but it's more about, to me, like how I read the movie, it's who do you trust, and like you're the level of you're because again, Mifune was content with, he knew his destiny and he was content with it. It's more about, almost like learn who to trust, and then once you stop trusting somebody, you pretty much stop trusting anybody, and a level of paranoia. Because again, like when there's a scene before the end where he sees the many spirits of the forest, that was
Yep.
a great scene, and that
Mhm.
and then we see the evil spirit again, and that spirit tells him, you never lose a battle unless that crabwood or whatever it's called is starts to move. And he's like, "Oh, how would it start to move? I'm gonna be invincible!" Ha ha ha! And then you see the final scene, how those trees in the mist start to move towards the castle, and you see the moment of realization, and it's like, "Oh, I'm fucked. This is it." And they see it, and and the army that was behind him only 5 minutes ago, suddenly it's all quiet because they've seen it as well. And he told them this is how he's gonna lose. And he's like, "Oh yeah, this is me done." And that's why
Yeah,
I
he
think
was
it
so
works.
cocky about it. He was
Yes,
like, "Ah, they said the only way I was going to lose the tree was walk."
because he is so
And they're
in.
all like,
Because he is so in on that, the
you know,
prophecy. Because, and again, it goes back to him being fine with the prophecy as long as he understands it, and he understood, oh, I'm never going to lose a battle as long as those woods will never move. And suddenly they start to move, and like the realization, and it's almost like an animal trapped in a corner where the animal realizes this is the end.
yeah.
My army is no longer, like, he talks to them and they are all silent, and suddenly you see the first arrow, and a second, and it starts to, oh no, like, again, as you said, does it do anything new or revolutionary? I probably not, but it's a certain vibe this movie has, this like unnerving kind of supernatural element I really enjoyed. And I wish, like, I need to like watch all Kurosawa's movies, because I wish there was one where he would do like a proper, or more like a horror thriller movie. That would be so awesome.
So the moral of this story is everybody should vote for Akira Kurosawa for the Welcome to the Wasteland uh,
Yes.
tournament. He has made the third round. This is such a great example of how you adapt and remake things.
Yes.
Because the most interesting adaptations are the ones where you don't quite 100% on the nose realize that this is an adaptation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like Hamlet.
Mm-hmm.
What's the most interesting, unique adaptation of Hamlet? The Lion King.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
has animals and music and it's animated. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I love the tragedy of Macbeth from Joel Cohen.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really do much in terms of what it's more of like a technical exercise because how it mixes like stage sets and more natural sets, and
Mm-hmm.
that's interesting. But like from a story standpoint, it's very straightforward culturally. I will take so many different kinds of films in feudal Japan.
Oh yeah.
Like that idea of just like take this story and put it in feudal Japan. That's cool as hell. Samurai. Bam. Love it.
And that's why many people were, even before Prey came out, they wanted like a Predator movie in feudal Japan. And I think there are maybe still something in the works. Imagine a Predator, kind of like Prey, but instead of being, in a like a Native Americans, they'll be in feudal Japan going up against like a samurais or ninjas and shit like that. Wow.
Get Hiroki Sanada
Yes.
signed now.
Yes.
This happened. That would be the coolest. Which that was one of the cool things about Westworld was when they brought in Shogun World.
Hmm.
Because like I would want to go on a cool trip into feudal Japan, not with those killer robots, but like, you know, but that's what's so cool about so many of Kurosawa's films got
Hmm.
adapted into westerns
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's a completely different culture, but it's a cool different way to sell it. And like have they done a Macbeth Western? That would be interesting. Obviously, they wouldn't be like kings
Yeah.
or lords and stuff like that. They'd probably be like a mayor or a sheriff or
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like that. But like it's how you do things different and interesting and add new dimensions to it.
And I think,
And
as you mentioned, like, like this is how you do not only adaptation, but the remake. Like, for
yes,
example, had Disney original or like live action remakes had a unique spin on them, I think there would be much more people, happier with those movies. Not like, oh, we're just gonna do everything we done in an animated movie, but it's gonna be
well,
live action.
I
You
feel
know?
like the only one that really tried to do that was
Mm.
Mulan, and
Yeah,
people hated it. And
yeah,
like enjoyed that movie a lot more than other people, but like, where's Mushu? Where's the music? And I'm like, well,
mm,
that's not what they were going for here. But
yeah,
like, that was one of those moments where it's like, we're sick of them just remaking all of our favorite films. But where's all the favorite things that I love? Oh,
yeah,
and exactly how it was. And that's the challenge trying to appease people. But
correct.
this was such a creative way because, like, not only is Mifune, you got Takashi Shimura, who,
Hmm.
like, the other most famous Japanese actor from Akira Kurosawa's films,
Hmm.
also in this. It just has such a great cast. It's so well directed, and it just has vibe and mood and atmosphere just piled stacked to high like a mountain. And
Yes.
you could do a lot with that, and it really works here.
100%. Like signed, seal, delivered. Everything you just said. Like, is it the best Kurosawa? Probably not. But for him, he's one of those directors. It's hard. Like, his top
Mhm.
five is like, average director would kill having one of his top fives as his like number one movie. Like, imagine, like,
Probably like I've seen quite a few of his films at this point,
hmm
and this is probably bottom top 10 for
hmm
me.
hmm
Any director would sell their soul to have this as like the best film they ever directed. And
yes,
Kurosawa is just like, I have like eight more better.
yeah, yeah,
And
agreed.
that's insane.
It
Because
is.
like that's the thing. Kurosawa is up there with Scorsese and Spielberg in terms of just the immense amount of incredible films that
No
they
question.
created over the course of their career. And surprisingly, Kurosawa doesn't have anywhere near as many films as either of them.
Yep.
Because,
Yep.
like,
Only 33.
yep. And that's also why it's like that would be a reasonably manageable dive
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm.
into his like it wouldn't be a year and a half like John
Yeah.
Ford. Which that's the thing. The Kurosawa, his biggest influence was John Ford.
Yes. Yes.
It's all reciprocates. Now, the other film we're going to talk about, which is also another Shakespearean adaptation
Mm-hmm.
in feudal Japan, and that
Mm-hmm.
is Ron. And I am certainly nowhere near as well versed with King Lear as I
Same.
am with Macbeth. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, if you adapt like Macbeth or Hamlet, I'm pretty good with like
Yeah.
in detail picking up the adaptation. I read King Lear years ago because I
Mm-hmm.
have a leather bound classic of all of Shakespeare's work, but like it's been so long. So
Yeah.
like this is my King Lear. It's
Mm-hmm.
this version. But look, what are your general thoughts on Ron?
So this is the second time. So Throne and Blood I haven't seen before, so that was my first time. This is
Mhm,
my second time watching Ran, and I've seen this first time about I want to say 14, 15 years ago. And
mhm,
this is yet again one of those movies I watched when I was a bit too young to understand. Like,
mhm.
and I think this is what many cinephiles face. You know, we want to watch every single, excuse me, greatest movie, but many of them you need to kind of grow up to actually fully appreciate. And this was definitely one of them. So I bought a 4K a long time ago. I was like, I knew even before we recorded this, I was like, I knew I need to give Ran another shot. And I watched it. Beautifully restored 4K, by the way. I could recommend 110 out of 10. It's to me, if you historical masterpiece, yeah, that's about it. It's like, like this would be a dictionary definition of historical masterpiece. Every frame, especially the first half an hour, yes, it might be a bit slower, but it sets
Mhm.
the mood and it just frames every single shot is so deliberately framed. Which again, if you read the IMDb trivia, it had to be because on one side there was an airport, on the other there was like some sort of a factory. So of course I
Yeah,
was like, I had to do this, guys, because otherwise,
yeah.
you would see airport. But it's such a like every frame a painting almost. And if you read about it, uh he's been making it like storyboarding it for 10 years. So it
Mhm,
took him 10 years to make it. And by that, he pretty much lost his sight. So most of those shots are like, by his like assistant director. But they were following exactly what Akira Kurosawa had storyboarded. And that movie, it not so looks great, right? Okay. The
yep.
story 160 minutes, but it didn't feel like 160 minutes. It felt like a nice 2-hour movie. It didn't feel that long. It was political intrigue. It was
Mhm.
a great historical, again, drama, kind of like Game of Thrones before Game of Thrones, if
Yeah.
I'm, yeah,
100%.
yeah.
Like
And it's
this is
just
Game of Thrones in feudal Japan.
Yeah, and then before if George R.R. Martin told me, if somebody if he said, "Oh yeah, I base Game of Thrones, obviously on Shakespeare and all that, but also on Ran," 100% would believe it, because there
Mhm,
is a couple of families, there's a split between the family, and then you need to go to this castle that happens, you need to go
mhm,
to, and it's so beautiful. It talks about many different layered things, like, family being one, the importance of, sticking together and what happens if family can fall apart and how quickly a dynasty can
mhm.
fall. It's just, yeah, like now the second time around, I appreciated it much more. What about you,
Yeah,
Shane?
I remember back during COVID following Magic of Film Instagram page who
Hmm.
started a Filmstagram movie club.
Yeah.
And each month it would pick a director and we'd do 4 weeks of that director. And
Hmm.
I remember it was Akira Kurosawa, and that was the first time I watched Ron.
Mm.
And I was blown away by this movie because like this was back in 2020. So like
Yeah.
I watched this for the first time about 4 years ago. So I was already late 20s, just about 30 years old, and
Hmm.
this hits, and like you said, from a visual standpoint, where Throne of Blood is this incredibly crisp, gorgeous black and white filmmaking, this is
Hmm.
the richest of
Yes.
color
Yeah.
filmmaking. And there's one particular shot, which also Tetsuya Nakadai, who plays the Lord in this, who is our King
Hmm.
Lear,
Hmm.
who has been in Harakiri and a lot of other really famous Japanese films, Sanjuro, with Akira Kurosawa. There's one shot like he's like old man makeup, like
Oh
old
yeah.
man,
Oh yeah.
and that whole entire set piece, siege on his castle.
Hmm.
And there's this one shot of him looking so world weary, staring right at the camera and flames behind him. And I'm
Hmm.
just like, there are few shots in cinema that look that incredible.
Yeah.
And that whole entire sequence of the raid of his castle was intense. It's thrilling. This has great action. Like you said,
Hmm.
it has all that political intrigue. It is a towering achievement of epic scale. Just the symmetrical shot of his how like his temple on fire with the two separate armies in yellow and red, and
Oh
just
yeah.
that framing of everything. It's just gorgeous. And the scale of this
Hmm.
film, that battle at the end, which you mentioned, how the hell
Hmm.
are we going to shoot this in between all of these
Yeah.
things? And the depth of shot in this film, it's something that I don't know if enough films people think about enough when it
Yeah.
comes to filmmaking is depth of shots. I think a
Hmm.
lot of people like deep focus think
Hmm.
about like I think like Mike Flanagan in terms of how he uses deep focus for horror, where it's like
Hmm.
there's things in focus behind you and you're just the behind what's in the forefront, and you're just like,
Yes. Yeah.
no, no. But how Kurosawa uses it is for scale. There's this shot of like in the forefront on a mountain, the young woman who's trying to like babysit the Lord towards the
Yeah.
end, who's like losing it, and you can see him like Jack Sparrow running across this open plain, and just it seems like such a simple shot, but like this woman is like hundreds of yards away,
Hmm.
and somehow
Hmm.
this captures that. The shot of all the men at the final battle, like coming up at the top of that hill, and just shots
Hmm.
like that, just like you don't think about how tough that is to frame that all there, but it gives such scale and a feeling of epicness.
Yes.
And this is his
Yes.
most epic movie because this was like decades of filmmaking prowess paneled into something grand and operatic and
Hmm.
something completely just mind blowing. And that final battle, like, there's
Hmm.
so many stunts, there's so many people, and trying to move everything around, and there's so many things that could go wrong with a shot like
Yep.
that. And this isn't CGI. These aren't people being like computer generated extras. Like these are all
Behind the
people
green
on
screen.
horses. It's
Yeah.
just like this is all real. And that's so
Hmm.
incredible. And like this film did come out in the 80s. So like this is from 1985. This is like late in life Kurosawa, but it's so absolutely incredible.
Exactly. Like when you said, like, he encapsulates that's pretty much his like filmography, like wrapped into a one movie. Like everything he's learned, because he was going at it from like late 30s, early 40s until pretty much, I think his last movie was like 89 or 91. It was like he made like
It
one or
went
two
a
after.
little bit into the 90s. Like this
Yes,
man
yeah.
was making movies for a long ass time.
Correct.
So
And I haven't seen the last two or three yet, but from what I understand, because this is famously, correct me if I'm wrong, this is famously his only movie he ever received a nomination for Best Director at the Oscars. I think like I read that this is the only one he's ever received a directing knob for.
Which, if he were with the sensibilities of the Academy today,
Hmm.
he'd be getting like nominations left and right because at
Yeah.
least they're nominating like foreign directors for best director on a regular
Yes.
basis. And
Yes.
like he would earn all of them.
And famously, he also said, because like he would always say in interviews, that's what I read as well. Which when they asked him, what are your favorite? What are your movies? Is your favorite? Those you made. Which one is your favorite? And he would always say the next one until he made Ran, and apparently, and until he died, which is like 14 years after this movie, in like 98, 99. He then said run. Like for every single time, apparently after he made run, he's like, this is my favorite movie of mine. Like, and I could see it. And that's again, and he's made Seven Samurai. He's
Yep.
made like, Throne of Blood, he like Hidden Fortress, like he
Rashomon
Rashomon.
and
Just like the list is
Ikaru,
long.
High and Low. Like
Yes,
there's so many amazing films that this man has made.
it's
And
long.
the influence, like the Hidden Fortress in Star Wars.
Yes.
Like this man is so influential, and that's how much this movie meant to him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That this was his crowning achievement.
100%. And again, like you can tell, like it seems cliche, but you can tell everything he's learned, even though he's almost blind at the end of the shooting, he put into the movie. And that movie, like for me, I think like I always like to say, I like all the genres. But if
Mhm.
there's a one I struggle with the most, it would be like historical dramas, like pretty, like I always call them like pretty dresses movie from like era long time ago. So like that would be the ones I struggle with the most. But with this one, that's like to me, this is like the prototypical. This is how you do it, and it still plays well even today. Uh, Everything is beautiful. The storyline, the plot. Let's talk. We need to talk about the
Mhm.
wife that's kind of behind it all. And like when they mention it for the first time, oh, this, our dad slaughtered our house and burned down this castle, and now, his firstborn is married to her. I'm like, why the fuck would you do that? And then when she slowly turns everybody against everybody else, and her destiny, what happens to her? Holy shit! Before
Was
that, the Fox scene. So she sends the second, was it the second husband's based like soldier or like warrior? Like she sends him on a mission. Oh yeah, to kill the second husband's wife. And he brings the fox head, like a statue's head, and tells a story about how foxes are evil and dangerous, and they already overthrown this and this and this and this. And he points it at her. I'm like, this is fucking funny. This is so good. I'm like, holy shit. And then you finally hear her admit to everything. I was like, yeah, this is why you wouldn't do this in real life. Like this dangerous.
this is 100% Game of Thrones. There's
Yeah.
just like Cersei Lannister is so Lady by Day, like
Hmm.
quoted. Like there's so much of that. And Mia Harada, who plays her, she is dangerous. She
Yep.
is intense. And the performance, like she sells it. And just one fell swoop at the end of the film, and just like this film knows when to throw blood at you
Yes.
and in a very effective way.
And what to
And
show and what not to show, because nowadays it would be so easy to show her dead body. No, this movie just shows you the swoop, it shows you the splash of blood on a wall, and
yep,
that's it.
so good. And that's such an incredible shot. And
Yes.
that's a sign of a great filmmaker that knows you get the impact
Yeah.
of that shot without having to
Like zoom
nullify
in.
it.
Yeah,
Yep.
like yeah.
Which
No, and
like
oh, yeah.
you
Sorry, on
have
you.
people like certainly room for that. Like there's a lot of Japanese cinema where it's like limb off and then
Hmm.
and of course that's what Quentin Tarantino based Kill Bill off of. Um like that kind of approach to it. But like Kurosawa's films have never been about all
Hmm.
the blood and guts
Yeah.
of the violence. It's the artfulness of how you tell the story.
Hmm.
And that is just the perfect way to tell this deceitful,
Hmm.
manipulative woman's end. And I'm sure this will turn some people off with like how big the performances are in this. But this is like I mentioned before, this is operatic.
Yes.
This
It
is
is
like
King Lear. It's
yeah,
Shakespearian.
it's
So like
Shakespearean's like
it is a
it's
theater. Like it's a
it's
theater on a screen.
the theater.
Yes.
And it's like it's that vibe. And this film captures that so well because
Hmm.
especially Nakadai's last scene. It's just like it is hamming this shit up, and I loved it. Loved all of it.
And see, what I loved about her performance is how she's not one note because she uses everything she has at her disposal. Like she uses her body, she uses her wit, she uses her brain, she uses her tears. She throws like she knows how to play the men around her in a
Mhm.
certain moment. Like, she knows exactly, oh, now I need to have sex with him. And again, I don't think Kurosawa deals with sex in many of his movies, but it's not shown, it's implied. It's
Mhm.
obviously what happened, but it's not shown.
So really,
You
this
see,
isn't Game of Thrones.
correct.
Uh,
It's not HBO. This is not HBO. This is Japan.
yes,
But
this is like if Game of Thrones was made with restraint.
yes,
Because Game of Thrones is made with like it all hanging open,
correct,
and
correct.
this is a different approach
Hmm.
to that same kind of that familial drama.
Hmm.
It's Succession.
Hmm.
It's all of that. It's Succession took place in
And
feudal Japan.
also like about how, again, about trust and how
Mhm,
people put on a facade. And because like at the beginning, the first half of the movie or first half an hour, when
mhm,
the dad tells them, I'm gonna nominate my oldest son, and he first like he almost rejects it, like, no, I wish you would live another 30 years, you don't have to do this. And the second son is kind of the same, and the third one is like, well, this is stupid. And we think, oh, he's gonna be the
oh,
villain.
dead
And
dad.
actually, yeah. And when because he points out the obvious flaws, and we think, we are used to, like, we are programmed to think, oh, he's gonna be the villain of this story, and turns out, no, he's the one who actually cares about it. Like even like in moments after when he says to the dad's advisor, "You're a fool. Why did you do this? You need to be there for my dad to advise him because I'm afraid he's in danger because of what he just done." Right? And then you see that play out how the first son, he's too eager to go to war, and the second is easily manipulated. Even in the first scene is so well established that he just follows his older brother. And then
Yeah.
later on, when we see the first brother's wife, how easily she can manipulate him, you can see that being set up in the very first scene where they're all together. And I thought that's another example of how Kurosawa just shows you rather than tells you straight away. And you need to kind of put it together. And there's so many moments like this. And I'm like, damn, this movie, I'm so happy I had to rewatch it because I was like, yeah, was worth it.
Well, in this film, like you mentioned, Kurosawa got nominated for Best Director.
Hmm.
This one costume design, which exquisite, just
Yes.
incredible.
Yep.
Best. This was nominated for cinematography. It was nominated for art direction, set direction,
Hmm.
which set decoration. Yeah, 100%.
100%. Yes. Yeah.
Which 1985. Trying to think, was that? Oh God, was that out of Africa? I'm trying
I
to.
think so.
I'm trying to think about like what was like the big Oscar film from that year, which like this should have been like this should have been, but
Hmm.
that's not always, and that's the thing. This has all the things that the Academy loves. This is like a historical costume drama, except cool and awesome.
Yeah,
Which,
it is kind of sad. Like it is sad because again, that's fine as much as I love the Oscars. Like,
yeah,
sometimes not all the best people, aka, oh yeah, you're right. It is. I'm checking it right now. It is the Out of Africa year. So, like, as much as I actually enjoy that movie, I'm not quite sure if they like, that's but yeah. I'm
Yeah,
really
because I'm pretty sure yeah, it lost like all of its Oscars to Out of Africa.
even
Cinematography and art direction. And
even sin
I love Sidney Pollack, but
yeah.
like,
Like even like look, director, maybe they were not up in the times and like okay, maybe they snapped in because of that. But like cinematography, like how? Like
it was Out of Africa's year when it
yeah,
should have been Ron's year.
yeah, I
But
know.
it's this film is incredible. And I feel like this is that crowning achievement of an
Hmm.
incredible director's career where
Hmm.
not many directors can go out. Like he had like a couple more films after this. Like he had Dreams, which that's one
Hmm.
I in particular I really want to see. But like
Hmm.
you have directors like who I mentioned already, Scorsese and Spielberg, who are still creating all-time classic films this late in their career. And
Hmm.
there's not many directors who can say that by the end of their career.
Correct. And even those movies are, like as I love Spielberg as much as the next cinephile, don't get me wrong, but even his latest movies are not exactly A plus plus movies, right? But which is fine, which, if you make so many movies as he's done or Scorsese's done, even I would argue Scorsese has a better track record. Like, not all of them will be A plus plus hits. However, with Kurosawa, he hasn't done as many. So like it's just yeah, it's hard to imagine, or I would love to see what he would do, at least like one more movie in today's day and age with like today's technology, like not necessarily CGI, but like all the camera, all the like newest cameras. I would love to have at least one more Kurosawa movie, like some sort of fantasy. It doesn't even have to be set in feudal Japan. Imagine like again horror or a thriller movie, modern thriller, and with his spin on it. I I think I'm not saying it will be A plus plus, but I think it will be worth seeing. And I think this is what most Kurosawa movies were for me. Even though they're not, some of them might not be like the top 10 or whatever, they are still worth seeing because there's
Yeah.
always something to latch onto, whether it's the atmosphere, whether it's the camera work, whether it's the framing, whether it's as you mentioned, the depth of field here. Many on purpose, there's only a few close-up shots. Most of them, as you mentioned, they are like long shots and like medium
Mhm.
range. So it gives you the scope of everything. And that's why everything feels big. It feels like there's so much at stake. Because, realistically, we are kind of watching this one family dynasty fall apart.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
It's like you wouldn't have things like Game of Thrones
Hmm.
without something like Ron.
Well, again,
And
like George R. R. Martin, he said he based a lot of Game of Thrones on Shakespeare. So King
yeah,
Lear, yeah, yeah.
well, yeah, and King Lear is the succession story.
Hmm.
Like so many things have derived from that.
Yeah.
And it takes an incredible filmmaker to take somebody else's work and make it your own. And
Yes.
Kurosawa had done that so many times. And yet also making things that were very much his own that
Hmm.
then influenced others. Like how many more adaptations of Seven Samurai are we gonna get in our lifetime?
Yeah. We've already had one remake, like not that long ago.
Well, yeah.
So,
So it's like, so you had Magnificent Seven,
hmm.
you had a remake of Magnificent Seven, you have a
Yep.
Bug's Life, which is
Yeah.
Seven Samurai, but with a twist with bugs and
Yes.
giggles, and then Rebel Moon is also just
Okay, okay, let's not
Seven
go that
Samurai.
far. It wants to be Seven Samurai, but let's not go that far. Like Rebel Moon
Well,
does.
look,
I know, I know.
I'm not talking about the quality of these
Yeah, I know.
movies. I'm saying like that's what it's trying to do,
Yeah.
and it failed miserably.
Trying is
Like
the operative word in that sentence. Yes.
miserably. But like that's the idea of like that's the influence.
Yes,
And
correct.
that's sometimes it's just crazy to think about like where's the egg? Where did it all start? Because that's the thing,
Mhm.
because Kurosawa was influenced by John Ford westerns, and then more modern westerns of the 50s and 60s were influenced by Akira Kurosawa, which were
Yep.
influenced by John Ford.
Hmm.
Um, Kurosawa laying down films like Throne of Blood and Ron, which really it's like Shakespeare. It's just
Hmm.
like cool
Hmm.
Japanese Shakespeare.
Yep.
And I'm sure there's people out there that were highly influenced by these films that might not even realize that they were influenced by Shakespeare.
Well,
And
we've already
it's
mentioned him. Spielberg, he famously Lucas and Spielberg,
yep,
both big fans. They flew him to the Oscars. They flew him out to the Oscar when he
yes,
received his, Lifetime Achievement Award. They flew
yep,
him out. They made sure he actually will be there to actually so they can present it to him because they grew up watching and admiring his movies. So
mhm,
if two well, Lucas, you can argue about like if one of the best directors of all time tells you this is my idol,
yeah.
there's something to it. you know
Well, and George Lucas, I think, is one of the greatest story makers
yes.
of Hollywood.
Yeah.
Like, he's an ideas guy.
Correct.
So, like, and he had great ideas that he drew upon from
Hmm.
this. And like Hidden Fortress is such a fun time too.
Yes.
But in the end, these are two incredible classics that are definitely both chilling on Max because
Hmm.
Max is the best and has all of these Kurosawa films on it because of their relationship with Criterion, which
Hmm.
also Criterion Channel. You can see a lot of these films as well.
Hmm.
But Luke, thank you so much as always for coming on and chatting movies with me.
Anytime, Shane. Always a blast.
And next month, we're going to be talking about some Orson Welles
Yes.
as we take a look at The Lady from Shanghai and also Touch of Evil. Next week, I'll be diving in with Jeff doing some Soderbergh. So that'll be a little bit of change of pace. Much cooler in that kind of cool sense. But these movies are pretty damn cool too.
Yes.
But the most important thing, let us know what you think. Comment, like, and share our episodes. We'd love it if you would follow or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast for the SPDM Crew Podcasting Network. Because I think just talking to Mike, we're up to 8 shows we got going
Hmm.
on, which is really awesome. Luke has, like, you really want to get a deep dive into the heart and soul of a human being, go check out Flicks and Chill. And of course, I have my wrestling podcast and my streaming Wasteland one as well. And HiFlyer Creative does some great work with all the artwork. So if you need some good artwork and
Hmm.
digital design, go check them out. But the most important thing is, thank you as always for tuning in and supporting the Wasteland Retrospective here on the SPDM Crew Podcasting Network.